Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion has been out for about a month and a half now, and I just got around to finishing it. As a lot of you know, I am a lifelong Final Fantasy fan. I love the original PSP release of Crisis Core. It's one of my favorite games of all time. So what did I think about this re-release slash remake slash remaster? Let's talk about it. So like I said, guys, I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy series, and I am a giant fan of Crisis Core. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and just to be totally upfront with you guys, I was really excited just to replay this game again and to see all of the little changes that they were making, most of which I was incredibly excited for. A lot of the gameplay stuff. Just some background too, I played the original PSP version on an emulator. I think I might have been maybe a freshman in high school back whenever I initially played it, and I used a lot of speed up hacks. If you played the original PSP version, you'll know that the gameplay experience is very different. The original PSP version used kind of this command deck system, almost a little similar to something like Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. It was made by the same development team back then, so it kind of used a lot of similar gameplay mechanics. And as a PSP game, there was really only so much you could do as far as making action combat, making an action RPG. There were plenty that were able to do it pretty well. I think the God of War series and Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep on PSP, those are good examples. There's plenty more out there as well. But for some reason, they went to this command deck style of gameplay. Some of it is fine on the PSP version, but if you remember back then, it was really slow. That was the main thing. It was just really time consuming. You had to wait for certain abilities to kind of be available to you again. It just was a slog, if I'm being honest. And so playing on the PSP version, I mean, I'm looking at this game now, and in hindsight, I can see, yeah, that was a really slow way to play the game. But if I'm being totally honest with you guys, I think the PSP version on an emulator with all of the speed up options, just blasting through all of those battles at like lightning speed, that was like, I had a great time doing that. So really, for me, when it came down to playing the original video game, I was all in it for the story. I mean, the characters here, getting to see the events that lead up to Final Fantasy VII. I was incredibly hyped to play this game when I was younger. Whenever I beat it, like I said, this is one of my favorite games of all time. So let's go ahead and talk about this remaster, remake, re-release, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of things that this game does that is just straight up ripped from the original base PSP version. And then there's lots of things that are very obviously remade, what looks like to be from the ground up. Some of that I think is a little questionable because it almost seems like they just straight up enhanced the original engine and almost just put like new graphics over it, if that makes sense. Let's just go ahead and talk about the good here. I mean, obviously the biggest standout here besides the gameplay is the graphics. Whenever you are playing the game, just the in-game graphics alone, they are incredible. If you played the Final Fantasy VII Remake, you are going to be seeing a lot of similarities to the way that the graphics look in that game. Kind of makes sense. I mean, they are re-releasing this game and remaking a lot of it so that it would, you know, just fit better into a playthrough, including the remake. There are lots of people out there who have still yet to play Crisis Core, and so for Square, I think they obviously wanted people to know the story of Zack and to know the events that lead up to Final Fantasy VII, so they are kind of doing a lot of enhancements here, and visually, I think that the visuals here are really solid. The other great thing here, like I was saying earlier, is the gameplay. Even though with all the speed up hacks and everything that I had running on the PSP emulator, I felt no rush, no need to really just be speeding through all of these battles, because the way that it plays as an action combat system with lots of, what do you call them, like shortcut commands, on all of the different buttons. I mean, it's just so much more smooth. It plays like an action RPG, which really, you play the original PSP version and it kind of feels like it's lacking something. This fills that void. As far as just, that feeling of it's missing something. This, it feels complete. The gameplay, the just all of the combat here, it feels complete. It feels like this is actually how they wanted the game to be able to play. But now we finally have all the buttons for shortcut commands and things like that. So this was definitely a welcome improvement. And just on top of the gameplay, one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about this game that I basically did not mess with these at all back whenever I played the base PSP game. I never was interested in doing all of the mission stuff. Like I said, when it came to just playing the original game, I was just in it for the story for the most part. I thought the gameplay was serviceable. I didn't have too many complaints about it, especially since I was just speeding through everything. But when it came to the mission system and going and doing all the missions, as far as, looking in your emails and stuff like that, all of the side content, especially with all of the materia that you can find, all of the summons and things like that, certain side characters that you get to see, for the most part here in the missions mode, I was never really into it back then. But playing it now, with the way that the gameplay has been enhanced, the missions were wildly addicting to me. I want to say maybe on the PSP version, on an initial playthrough, I think I probably played the game from start to finish in maybe 14, 15 hours or so. Because like I said, I wasn't doing any of the missions or anything like that. I wasn't going for the gold. I wasn't going for all of the, all the extra materia and all of the extra items. And I wasn't trying to grind out my levels or anything like that. I was just going straight through the story. So my initial playthrough was fairly short, and this playthrough, from pressing new game to whenever I saw the credits roll, I think it was about 26 hours, and I think I only got done with maybe 54% of the missions that are available here. There's a lot of content here. If you're looking for something just to be able to pick up and go, guys, I highly recommend picking up the Switch version, because the gameplay system here for the missions, it lends itself well to just pick up and go gameplay. I played the PS5 version because I personally was just looking for that sort of visual fidelity. I wanted it to feel as close to a companion to Final Fantasy VII Remake as I could possibly get it, but we'll talk about more visuals later on in the video. As far as gameplay goes, as a console experience, I think you're getting a full game here, Sure, it's not a 60-hour game or anything like that, but that doesn't mean that you can't make it a 60-hour game. The story is short and sweet as far as JRPG standards go, and if you like the gameplay here, I mean, you're going to have a blast with the missions. Since we're already kind of talking about the story here, another great thing about this game, and I'm not going to go too far into spoilers because like I said, this game is kind of coming out keeping in mind that there are lots of people out there who still have not experienced Crisis Core, but also even just the original Final Fantasy VII. I know plenty of people are waiting for the entire remake trilogy to come out to really dive headfirst into the 7 series. Really, I'm not going to give any spoilers for Crisis Core, and I guess I'm not going to be giving any spoilers for 7 Remake or the original 7 either, so you can rest assured that this is pretty much a spoiler-free review. But the story here to this game, even though I only spent about 14 or 15 hours with this game back when I was just speeding through all the gameplay and everything, the story that sits here in this game, especially if you've played the original Final Fantasy VII, the way that characters are introduced and the way that we just see this whole story play out, and the entire final act, even though I've played this game multiple times whenever I was younger, I played it again and I can't help but just feel like teary-eyed every time that I play this game. It's kind of an emotional experience, and maybe you're someone who will play this game and you won't feel that emotional experience. That's fine. I think in general, from my perspective, I think that the character work here for almost all the characters is done pretty well. There are some characters here and there that I know plenty of people are kind of conflicted about as far as their placement in the series. But in general, I think Zack is one of the best characters ever. His entire mantra of heroism and trying to just be the guy who just saves the world. you know? He's got this very childlike mentality of, I just want to be a hero. I want to save the world. And towards the end of the game, still without getting into too many spoilers, he still has that mentality of, I want to be the hero. But it kind of transforms into, I'm going to be the hero. He has a much more mature mentality about what being a hero is. And if you're someone like me who just loves like a classic, I don't know, a classic fantasy story like this of just going and saving the day, there's a lot more nuance here than just that. But as it sits alone, the story here is fantastic. Even if you're not a fan of the gameplay, whether it's the PSP version or this version, the story, no matter how you experience it, I really think is something worth experiencing at least one time in your life. I will say, and this is just from my experience, when I initially played Crisis Core, I had not played Final Fantasy VII. I was going in chronological order. So I saw like cutscenes online of the Before Crisis mobile game in Japan that never came to America. And again, I was just trying to experience the story based on how it happens in the universe and the timeline of Final Fantasy VII. And I'm just going to be straight with you guys. If I could give you a recommendation, I think I would recommend you play the original Final Fantasy VII before you jump into the story of Crisis Core. I personally, even though that's not what I did, looking back at it now, I personally feel like there are many moments in the game that have a much more higher emotional impact on you as a player if you have pretty much every detail. Maybe not every detail, but like just all of the moments of the story from Final Fantasy VII in mind going into this game. But that's just my 2 cents. Obviously, you can, I mean, the game on its own, even if there was no, game that as far as the story took place after this, I think this game just stands alone. I mean, it's a great game. It's got fantastic story. It's got really nice characters. It's got great gameplay. There's a lot here that I love about this game. But with all things, nothing is perfect. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that I am mixed about. And one of the things that I am pretty mixed about, it's one of those things where it's like, I like this, but every now and then I hate it at the same time. And that is the visuals aspect of the game. One thing that I like about it is how it's going for that Final Fantasy VII remake sort of style. As far as just like the photorealism mixed with sort of the stylized fantasy stuff, I think it works sometimes. But remember, this is a PSP game that came from the same guys who were working on Birth by Sleep. So whenever you look at the graphics, like you compare the graphics of the PSP version to this version, you can see that there is a drastic difference, not only just in the graphic quality, but the style is completely different. For me personally, there were many times where I felt that certain scenes kind of made me feel a different way, whether that be good or bad, because the style was different. The original Crisis Core on PSP is it doesn't look realistic. Like, they look like people that you're looking at, like all of the humans in the game, you can clearly see that they're, proportionate human beings for the most part. But there's also a certain style to them that is very cartoony, right? In many ways, you can definitely see that they designed characters and they designed story beats kind of with this cartoony style in mind. So there are many moments in the game where you're watching a cutscene or something like that in the remake, and then a character might do something that looks really weird, and the only thing that you could possibly be thinking is, no person would move like that. But on the PSP version, like I said, the style, like just the entire art direction is just different on the PSP version. So for me personally, when I would notice those scenes in the PSP version, I never thought about it that way. But now I'm coming back to it again with all of these, all the graphical fidelity and the style change to be a bit more photorealistic. And there are just so many moments where I'm just like, no way a person would actually do that with their body. Just in this situation. Like, what are they doing? They look like an idiot. So it's like kind of this double-edged sword. Yes, when you're playing the game, the environments, the characters, everything looks really good. But a lot of this game is, some people call it a remaster, some people call it a remake. For the most part, this is almost a straight-up copy and paste of the original PSP version, as far as just character movements and stuff like that. Every now and then there will be some variation in it. You can tell that they decided to change up some cutscenes and things like that. Obviously, everything is voice acted now, so certain cutscenes are in the game that just weren't in the game the way that they are in this game, if that makes sense. The remake adds a lot of content to sort of fill in the gaps the original PSP game had because it didn't have any voice acting. But even still, every now and then, you kind of get that feeling of just like, man, how much effort are they really putting into this? It's a little confusing every now and then. Another thing that I'm a tad mixed on is, I think that the reorchestrated soundtrack sounds a lot better, obviously, especially if your only experience with the music and the sound design in this game is from the PSP version. Obviously, there's a lot to be desired from, experiencing just the PSP version. But now everything has been touched up, not just the visuals, but the sound as well. Everything sounds really nice, and the music has been touched up as well. And there are a few songs that I think are really well composed. But for the most part, and this is just me personally, this is just kind of me, this is the same mixed thing that I have on the base PSP version of the game as well. I'm just not personally a huge fan of I'm blanking on his name right now, the composer of the music in this game. I'm pretty sure he also might have done work on The World Ends With You, I believe. In general, when it comes to the music in this game, I like that it sounds a lot nicer here in the remaster, but the soundtrack is kind of a hit or miss for me. Like I said, there are a few songs in this game that are very memorable. Plenty of songs in this game that upon just hearing it in the background might make me feel kind of emotional. The soundtrack's not terrible. The soundtrack is just kind of hit or miss for me, so that's why it's kind of going in the mix section. But those are just the few things that I'm kind of mixed about. Now let's go ahead and talk about the things that I just could not stand about this game. They kind of are exclusive to this remake, remaster. I didn't necessarily feel this way about the original game because these are some changes and some things that I noticed about the game, just on this re-release. So let's go ahead and talk about the bad in the game. And firstly, let's just talk about visuals here again for a second. Every now and then, a cutscene will play that is in the game engine, right? You'll be playing the game, you'll walk into a room using the same game engine that you're playing it in, it will play a cutscene, and sometimes, they're a little bit more choreographed, but still running in the same game engine. And then every now and then, you will get what looks like the game engine, but for some reason, you can definitely tell that they put up, some sort of FMV, like it's just lower quality. Same sort of style as the in-game engine, but you can just tell. You can't really see right here, but this is, right in front of me is my 4K television, right? So I'm playing this on PS5. Sitting like right here. Here's if you hear that, I'm touching the TV. It's pretty close to me. I probably shouldn't sit this close to my TV. Whenever you're playing video games like this, or you have a nice display in front of you, and for the most part, everything is running at 4K resolution, and then you get to a scene that almost looks like it's dropped to like 720p. Maybe it's 1080p. I don't know. There's just a noticeable decrease in quality with some of those cutscenes. And then even worse is whenever it starts to play cutscenes that are just straight out of the PSP version. In the PSP version, you'll get plenty of cutscenes here and there that are big FMVs. They're not running in the game engine. This is just Square Enix big budget cutscene, right? There's a couple of these that play throughout the game, and they're all really nice. I imagine if you're playing it on a really small screen, because they did not do enough work, in my opinion, upscaling the resolution of those cutscenes. Because even on the PSP version, when I was emulating it, I still had a fairly decent PC back then. I think I had some sort of graphics setting on in the emulator that kind of it upscaled those cutscenes slightly. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, I did not notice a difference between like emulating those cutscenes with it upscaled back then versus what Square Enix has put in this video game. Some of these cutscenes just look really, really low quality. If the other change of cutscenes that I was talking about earlier were 720p, this is like 480p. And like I said, I'm playing this 4K video game on my 4K monitor, fairly close to the screen, so I can see all of that like really clearly. So that's another reason why I think maybe, I don't know exactly how much the difference is playing it handheld on Switch, but a piece of me feels like maybe that would have been the best way to experience the game just like that, because if you're playing it handheld mode, maybe you won't see the dip in quality. Just in general, there was just so much varying in cutscenes. I don't think I really had any other like I didn't have like graphical issues or anything like that. It was literally just the change up of the cutscenes. You could tell like, oh, they're not like, this cutscene is definitely not being rendered the same way as the previous cutscene. Oh, this cutscene is a CG cutscene. Whoa, this looks like it's running on a PSP, but on my 4K monitor. That doesn't look good. I was not a fan of that. And the other thing here too, and this is probably the thing that everyone has been talking about the most. I'm not really someone to just hop on a bandwagon or anything like that. I like to have my own personal thoughts on things. I don't like just regurgitating what everyone else is saying. But from the initial trailers of this game, we kind of get a sample of what Zack sounds like. And I remember from the beginning, I thought, this guy sounds like a nerd. And oh man, I personally am just someone who has just kind of always had, not like an attachment to the original voice actor for Zack. Now I'm blanking on his name too. Sometimes you just hear a voice and it just sticks with you and you just don't hear anything else. Every now and then, for instance, like Cloud, right? Cloud had voice acting in Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, Advent Children. He's had, I think his name was Steve Burton, and then Final Fantasy VII Remake came out. And a lot of people did not like the voice acting for Cloud, and then a lot of people thought that it was a huge upgrade. And then a lot of people didn't even notice. I personally was someone who barely even noticed. But, you know, after comparing things, you can kind of start to hear the difference if you're just directly comparing them one-to-one. But like Cloud, for instance, I'm personally someone who's like, yes, keep that guy. I love that dude, right? Zack, on the other hand, Zack sounds awful to me. I am personally someone who, whether I'm directly comparing it one-to-one with the PSP version, there are some lines in this game. And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that they are adding dialogue over cutscenes that did not have any voice dialogue in the original game. There are cutscenes in here that just sound awful.
What's with Angeal? How long is he gonna slack off like this? It's already been a month. Sephiroth's no help either. Lumping Angeal together with Genesis. Genesis is a deserter who took a bunch of seconds and thirds along with him. He used copies of himself to attack us. Angeal wouldn't condone something like that. His soldier honor means way too much to him. Everything's so messed up now. Angeal, just come back to us.
I actually don't really have much of a problem with any other voice actors' performances here in the game. And this is the other thing too. I've seen a lot of people online talk about the voice acting here. And a lot of people are giving the voice actor, I think, a little bit more credit than I personally would. Because a lot of people are saying, you know, this is just the voice direction. Don't blame the voice actor. Blame Square because it was the voice direction. I don't really know how much of that I can really buy, because there are seriously some lines of dialogue in this game where I'm like, that was your best take? Like, that was really, like, that was it? Okay. Okay, Zack. Like that. If this wasn't for the entire game. This happened maybe like every fourth or every fifth cutscene. Every couple of times that Zack would talk, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, shut this guy up. Like, maybe I'm being a little too harsh here, But seriously, I think a lot of people are saying things like, you know, it's not the voice actor's fault. And there are seriously many times where I'm like, has this guy ever voice acted before? Like, I don't mean to just like be like mean on this, but it's not even just the fact that I liked the original voice actor more. It's that I'm listening to this guy's performance of Zack in the remake, and I seriously sometimes am like, where did they pick this guy up from? Like, was this really the best that we can do? Obviously, yeah, saying things like that, it sounds like I'm just being mean to the voice actor. I have nothing against the voice actor himself. I just think he should have picked a different job. I just think this is like his performance here. I don't know what else he's done. I haven't heard anything else from the new voice actor of Zack, but wow. I mean, I don't mean to just linger on this for so long, but there were seriously many moments where I was like, this part of the game is now kind of ruined. Not like as if this is like the worst thing ever, but compared to what it was originally, whether it was voice acted or not, let's say it wasn't voice acted. Some moments where I'm just like, man, maybe should have just left that unvoice acted. Just left that as text, because I really was not a fan of that. And of course, there are many people out there who will say, just play it in Japanese, which, to your credit, you're right. I have no idea what bad voice acting sounds like in Japanese, so oftentimes I will watch an anime like in Japanese or something, just because I know exactly what bad voice acting in English sounds like, but I don't know what bad voice acting sounds like in Japanese. But when it comes to Final Fantasy, and when it came to Crisis Core in particular, and just jumping back into this game that I loved, I just wanted to hear it all again in my native language, I guess, if that makes sense. Just because, I don't know, that's how I initially experienced the game. So I was hoping for a similar experience again. And I was really hoping to kind of be wrong about the voice actor, because I've seen a lot of other people say, like, it grew on me. After a little while, I didn't notice it anymore. And I want to say probably all the way up until, like, really the last chapter of the game, maybe the last half of the last chapter, I pretty much noticed it throughout the entire game, and it was frustrating. I'm not gonna lie. So I don't mean to linger on it too long, but in general, other than just that and some of the visual stuff here and there, my overall experience with Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion was very positive. If I genuinely were to recommend somebody play Crisis Core for the first time, I would say that this is the version that you should play. All of the quality of life changes, the graphical, you know, it's up to date as far as like modern gaming standards go. There's just a lot of good that this game does, and a lot of good that the original game did as well that still carries over to today. I think that this game is absolutely worth playing, no matter what language you're playing it in. Maybe you're like you're someone else and you liked the voice actor for the remake a lot more than I did. If you did, awesome. I'm really glad that you did. The voice actor needs at least one fan, you know? I really, really, really do like this game. I think it's really good. For the little gripes in here that I have personally, like I said, this is all just my personal feeling, my personal taste, the things that stand out to me personally. This is not a, you know, you should feel the same way or anything like that. I think that this is a fantastic game. And if you have played the game, go ahead in the comments below. Let me know exactly everything that you thought about the game. Maybe you loved the things that I hated. Maybe you hated the things that I loved. Go ahead in the comments below. Let me know what you thought about Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. And with that, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.